My name is Calera, and I am 28 years old. 3 weeks ago, my mother sent me a text that shattered everything I believed about family loyalty. The message was simple: please do not come. We need a drama-free wedding. My younger sister immediately liked the text. But that night, while scrolling through social media in my empty apartment, I discovered something that would turn our entire family upside down. What I found was not just betrayal. It was a carefully orchestrated lie that had been destroying lives for years. Hey everyone watching from around the world. Before we dive into this incredible story of family secrets and ultimate justice, please hit that like button if you are ready for some serious family drama. Make sure to subscribe because trust me, you will want to see how this revenge story unfolds. Comment below and tell me where you are watching from. I love connecting with viewers globally. Now, let me tell you about the night that changed everything and led to the most satisfying family takedown you have ever heard. The wedding my mother was referring to belonged to my sister Dahlia, who was marrying her college sweetheart Marcus in what she described as her dream ceremony. For months, I had been excluded from wedding planning discussions, dismissed from family group chats, and treated like an unwelcome outsider. Mom always had excuses. Dahlia wanted something intimate, they were keeping costs down, or my dramatic personality might upset the bride. I had accepted this treatment because I genuinely believed I was the problem. Growing up, I was always labeled the troublemaker while Dahlia was the golden child. She excelled in school, dated respectable boys, and never questioned our parents' decisions. Meanwhile, I struggled with anxiety, chose creative pursuits over traditional careers, and had the audacity to call out family dysfunction when I saw it. That Tuesday evening, after receiving the devastating text, I was mindlessly scrolling through Instagram when I saw Dahlia's latest post about her bachelorette party. The photos showed her surrounded by bridesmaids I recognized, our cousins, high school friends, and family friends who had known me my entire life. But one photo made my blood run cold. There, in the background of a candid shot, was my ex-boyfriend Ryan. He was not just present at the party, he was clearly part of the celebration, laughing and holding hands with someone I could not quite see. I zoomed in, my heart pounding, and realized he was with Dahlia herself. Ryan and I had dated for 3 years. Our relationship ended 8 months ago when he suddenly became distant and claimed he needed space to figure things out. The breakup devastated me because I had been planning to move in with him. I spent months wondering what I had done wrong, replaying every conversation and analyzing every moment. Now, staring at this photo, pieces began falling into place. Ryan's mysterious work trips that coincided with family events I was excluded from. Phone calls he would take in another room. His sudden disinterest in meeting my family, claiming he was too busy when he had previously been eager to join us for holidays. I immediately called my cousin Maria, who was prominently featured in the bachelorette photos. She answered on the second ring, her voice filled with guilt before I even spoke. Calera, I was wondering when you would call. Maria, what is Ryan doing at Dahlia's bachelorette party? The silence stretched so long I thought she had hung up. Finally, she sighed deeply. I thought you knew. Everyone assumed you knew, and that was why you were not invited to things anymore. Knew what exactly? Ryan and Dahlia have been together for almost a year. She broke up with Marcus 6 months ago, but they are pretending they are still engaged because the wedding deposits were non-refundable and your parents already sent out invitations. The wedding is actually going to be Ryan and Dahlia getting married. The phone slipped from my trembling hand. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach and stolen all the air from my lungs. My sister had stolen my boyfriend, lied to everyone about it, and was now marrying him while using me as a scapegoat to avoid awkward questions from relatives. But Maria was not finished. She continued talking, and I scrambled to pick up the phone. There is more, Calera. Your parents know. They have known from the beginning. Your mom helped plan the whole thing. She said it was better this way because Ryan was always meant to be with Dahlia anyway, and you needed to learn to move on. They thought if they gradually excluded you from family events, you would naturally distance yourself and not cause drama when the truth came out. I sat in stunned silence as Maria revealed the extent of the conspiracy. My parents had actively participated in this deception. They had encouraged Ryan to break up with me by telling him I was unstable and that Dahlia was a better match for his ambitious nature. They had convinced extended family members that I was going through a difficult phase and needed space. The cruelest part was learning that my family had been painting me as mentally unstable to justify my exclusion. They told relatives I was seeing a therapist for anger management issues and that I had threatened to ruin the wedding if I was involved. None of this was true, but it effectively isolated me from my support system. Maria apologized repeatedly, explaining that she had been torn between loyalty to family harmony and loyalty to me. She revealed that several cousins had questioned the story but were told not to contact me directly because it would trigger an episode. After hanging up, I spent the night crying and processing the magnitude of their betrayal. But as dawn broke, something shifted inside me. The sadness transformed into crystal clear anger and determination. They had underestimated me completely. I realized they had made a critical error in their planning. By painting me as unstable and dramatic, they had created the perfect cover for what I was about to do. If I was supposedly unpredictable anyway, no one would suspect that my next moves were calculated and strategic. That morning, I began documenting everything. I screenshot every social media post, saved every text message, and started reaching out to family members who had been fed lies about my mental state. I was not going to let them rewrite history or destroy my reputation to cover their tracks. The wedding was in 10 days, and I had work to do. The first thing I did was contact a lawyer. I needed to understand my options and ensure that everything I planned to do stayed within legal boundaries. The consultation revealed something interesting. Ryan had been living in an apartment that I had co-signed for, and he had never removed my name from the lease or utilities. Technically, I still had legal access to the property. More importantly, the lawyer helped me understand that my parents' campaign to portray me as mentally unstable could constitute defamation, especially since it had damaged my relationships with extended family and potentially affected my professional reputation. Several relatives had apparently expressed concerns to my colleagues about my condition. Armed with legal knowledge, I began phase 1 of my plan, fact gathering and alliance building. I reached out to Marcus, Dahlia's supposed fiancé who was being deceived just like I had been. Finding his contact information was easy since he was still listed as the groom on all the wedding websites and social media posts. I sent him a carefully worded message explaining that I had information he needed to know about Dahlia, and we agreed to meet at a coffee shop across town. Marcus arrived looking exhausted and confused. He immediately asked if I knew why Dahlia had been so distant lately and why she kept changing wedding plans at the last minute. When I showed him the photos of Ryan and Dahlia together, his face went through a series of emotions: confusion, recognition, hurt, and finally, anger. I knew something was wrong, he said quietly. She has been picking fights about everything, criticizing choices we made months ago, and acting like she did not want to marry me anymore. But when I suggested postponing the wedding, she insisted we had to go through with it because of the money. Marcus revealed that Dahlia had been increasingly cruel to him, nitpicking his appearance, mocking his career choices, and making him feel like he was not good enough for her. She had convinced him that his insecurities were the problem and that he needed to step up to deserve her. She made me feel like I was going crazy, he admitted. Like I was imagining the distance between us. I felt a surge of recognition. They had used the same gaslighting tactics on both of us, making us doubt our own perceptions and blame ourselves for their deception. Marcus and I spent 3 hours comparing notes and timelines. The manipulation had been systematic and sophisticated. Dahlia had been scheduling dates with Ryan during times when Marcus was working late or traveling for business. She had convinced Marcus that her decreased affection was due to wedding stress and his own inadequacies as a partner. By the end of our conversation, Marcus had agreed to help expose the truth. He was particularly motivated by the financial aspect. He had spent thousands of dollars on a wedding that was essentially a sham designed to humiliate him publicly. Next, I contacted my former colleagues at the marketing firm where I had worked before starting freelance consulting. I needed their expertise in social media strategy and reputation management. When I explained the situation, my former supervisor Jennifer immediately offered to help. "This is absolutely insane," she said. "Your family has been systematically destroying your reputation based on lies. We need to document everything and prepare a comprehensive response." Jennifer helped me create a detailed timeline of events with supporting evidence. We gathered screenshots, saved voicemails, and compiled a list of every person who had been told false information about my mental state. The documentation was extensive and damning. We also developed a strategic communication plan. Rather than confronting my family directly, which they could dismiss as dramatic behavior, I would first privately reach out to extended family members and family friends to correct the record. Jennifer helped me craft messages that were calm, factual, and supported by evidence. The responses were immediate and telling. Aunt Patricia called me within an hour of receiving my message, crying and apologizing. She had been deeply concerned about the stories she was hearing and felt terrible for believing them without reaching out to me directly. "Your mother told me you had threatened to hurt yourself if Dahlia got married," she sobbed. "She said you were obsessed with Ryan and had been stalking him. I am so ashamed that I believed her without talking to you first." Uncle Robert was furious when he learned the truth. He had been planning to contribute money to what he thought was Dahlia and Marcus's wedding, and he felt betrayed by the deception. He immediately offered to help expose the truth to other family members. Within 48 hours, I had a coalition of family members who were outraged by the lies and manipulation. They began reaching out to others, sharing the real story and the evidence I had compiled. The truth was spreading faster than my parents could control it. But I was not done yet. Phase 2 of my plan involved the wedding vendors and the venue. Since my name had been associated with threatening to ruin the wedding, I decided to contact vendors directly to clarify what that actually meant. I reached out to the florist, the photographer, the caterer, and the venue coordinator, explaining that there had been some family miscommunication and I wanted to ensure everyone had accurate information. The conversations were enlightening. The wedding planner revealed that my mother had specifically instructed all vendors not to communicate with me under any circumstances because I was mentally unstable and might try to sabotage the event. She had even requested additional security to prevent me from showing up uninvited. More interesting was learning that several vendor payments were behind schedule, and Dahlia had been pressuring them to proceed despite incomplete payments by promising that family money would cover everything after the ceremony. I began to suspect that the financial situation was more precarious than anyone realized, and that the rushed timeline was not just about love but about money and deposits they could not afford to lose. The photographer mentioned something particularly revealing. Dahlia had requested that all photos of the groom be taken in a way that his face was not clearly visible, claiming it was for artistic purposes. Now it made perfect sense, she needed photos that could work regardless of whether Marcus or Ryan ended up at the altar. By the end of week 1, I had gathered enough evidence to destroy their entire narrative and had built a support network of family members who were ready to take action. But I was saving the most devastating revelation for the wedding day itself. The momentum was building faster than I had anticipated. By day 8 before the wedding, my phone was ringing constantly with family members who had learned the truth and wanted to express their outrage and support. The carefully constructed narrative my parents had built was crumbling, and they were starting to panic. My mother called me for the first time in months, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Clara, I do not know what lies you are spreading, but you need to stop this nonsense immediately. You are ruining your sister's happiness." "Actually, Mom, I am just telling people the truth. Something you should try sometime." "The truth?" "The truth is that you were jealous and bitter because Ryan chose Dahlia over you. You need to accept that and move on with your life." Her words confirmed what Maria had told me, they genuinely believed they were justified in their actions. In their minds, I was the problem that needed to be managed, not the victim of their betrayal. "Tell me, Mom, when exactly were you planning to let Marcus know that he is not actually marrying Dahlia?" The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if she had hung up. Finally, she spoke, her voice colder than I had ever heard it. Marcus will figure things out eventually. Some people are just not meant to be together. Dahlia and Ryan are a better match. And you decided this without consulting either Marcus or me? You just manipulated everyone's lives to get the outcome you wanted? I did what was best for my family. I am your family too, Mom. You stopped being family when you chose to be selfish and dramatic instead of supporting your sister's happiness. The call ended with her hanging up on me, but I had recorded the entire conversation. Her words would be useful later. That afternoon, I received an unexpected call from Ryan himself. His voice was shaky and defensive. Clara, we need to talk. This situation has gotten out of hand. Really? Which part has gotten out of hand? The lying, the cheating, or the systematic campaign to convince everyone I am mentally unstable? Look, I know this looks bad, but you do not understand how complicated everything became. I never meant for it to happen this way. Ryan proceeded to give me the most pathetic justification I had ever heard. According to him, he had fallen in love with Dahlia gradually and had tried to fight his feelings. He claimed that breaking up with me was actually an act of kindness because he did not want to string me along when his heart belonged to someone else. Your parents helped me understand that you and I were never really compatible long-term, he explained. They pointed out that Dahlia and I had more in common and similar life goals. So my parents convinced you to dump me for my sister, and you thought that was normal family behavior? They just wanted what was best for everyone involved. Ryan's version of events revealed the extent of my parents' manipulation. They had apparently spent months comparing Dahlia and me to Ryan, highlighting my flaws and Dahlia's strengths. They had shared private information about my struggles with anxiety and my career uncertainties, while portraying Dahlia as the stable, supportive partner he deserved. But the most disgusting part was learning that they had been planning this switch for almost 2 years. My mother had apparently noticed Ryan's attraction to Dahlia during a family barbecue and had begun orchestrating opportunities for them to spend time together. The whole thing had been a calculated campaign to break up my relationship and transfer Ryan to Dahlia. What about Marcus? I asked. Did any of you consider how this would affect him? Marcus will be fine. He is a good guy, and he will find someone else. This is just how things worked out. The casual dismissal of Marcus's feelings and the months of deception he had endured crystallized my resolve. These people viewed other human beings as chess pieces to be moved around for their convenience. After the call, I immediately contacted Marcus to share Ryan's confession. He listened in stunned silence as I played parts of the recording. 2 years, he whispered. She has been planning to leave me for 2 years while pretending to plan our future together? Marcus revealed something that made the betrayal even worse. 6 months ago, when Dahlia's behavior had become increasingly cold and critical, he had suggested couples counseling. Dahlia had refused, claiming that their problems were entirely his fault and that therapy would be a waste of time and money. She convinced me that I was the problem, he said. She made me believe that if I just tried harder, loved her better, supported her more, things would go back to how they used to be. I have been killing myself trying to save a relationship that she had already abandoned. We spent that evening planning our next moves. Marcus had access to shared accounts and communications that revealed the financial extent of the deception. Dahlia had been using money he contributed for wedding expenses to fund dates with Ryan. She had charged romantic getaways with Ryan to credit cards that Marcus was responsible for paying. More damaging was the email trail between Dahlia and my parents coordinating their lies. Marcus had access to Dahlia's email account and found months of correspondence discussing how to manage my mental health narrative and keep me isolated from family events. One email from my mother was particularly revealing: make sure Clara does not find out about Ryan until after the ceremony. If she causes a scene, we can use it as proof that she really is unstable. The important thing is protecting Dahlia's reputation and ensuring the wedding happens smoothly. Another email from my father discussed financial strategies, If we can get through the ceremony without drama, the vendor payments become Marcus's legal responsibility as the official groom. Once everything is finalized, Dahlia can reveal her true feelings and transition to Ryan without any financial consequences. Reading these emails was like discovering that my family had been running a criminal enterprise designed to defraud Marcus and destroy my reputation. The level of planning and calculation was breathtaking. Marcus and I decided to bring in one more ally, his sister Amanda, who was a journalist with experience investigating fraud. When we showed her the evidence we had compiled, her reaction was immediate and intense. "This is not just family drama," she said. "This is systematic fraud and emotional abuse. Marcus, you could have legal grounds for restitution, and Clara, what they have done to your reputation could constitute defamation." Amanda helped us understand the broader implications of what we had uncovered. The financial deception alone involved thousands of dollars and could have serious legal consequences. The defamation campaign against me had been extensive enough to potentially damage my professional opportunities and personal relationships permanently. But Amanda also pointed out something crucial: we had the power to control how the story was told. Instead of letting my family frame the narrative around my supposed instability, we could present the evidence methodically and let the truth speak for itself. "The wedding is in 3 days," she said. "You have enough evidence to stop this completely, but the question is how you want to handle it. You could expose everything privately and let them call off the ceremony quietly, or you could let them proceed and expose the truth publicly when it will have maximum impact." The choice was ours, and the wedding was approaching fast. In 72 hours, my sister would be standing at an altar, preparing to marry Marcus while planning to run away with Ryan immediately afterward. The question was whether I would let that deception continue or detonate the truth bomb I had spent 10 days carefully constructing. The stage was set for the most explosive family confrontation any of us had ever experienced. Wedding day arrived with perfect weather and maximum chaos brewing beneath the surface. I had made my decision: let the ceremony begin, then expose everything when the impact would be devastating and undeniable. Marcus and I coordinated our timing perfectly. He would proceed as the groom until the moment when the officiant asked if anyone objected to the marriage. That would be my cue to present the evidence publicly, ensuring maximum witnesses and no opportunity for my family to spin the narrative later. Amanda positioned herself strategically with recording equipment, documenting everything for potential legal proceedings. She had also quietly informed several key family members about what was going to happen, ensuring we had allies in the crowd who could corroborate events later. I arrived at the venue 30 minutes before the ceremony, dressed elegantly and carrying a folder containing printed copies of every piece of evidence we had gathered. The security my mother had hired to keep me away was nowhere to be seen. Apparently, she had become overconfident that their intimidation tactics had worked. My mother spotted me immediately as I entered the chapel. Her face went white, then flushed red with anger as she rushed toward me. "What are you doing here? I told you not to come." "Security." "Actually, Mom, I was never officially uninvited from anything. You just sent some manipulative texts and spread lies about my mental health. But today, we are going to clear all that up." Before she could respond, I walked calmly to an empty seat in the 3rd row, right where everyone could see me. Extended family members who had learned the truth over the past week gave me encouraging nods and supportive smiles. The tide had already turned, but my parents did not realize it yet. Dahlia appeared at the back of the chapel in her wedding dress, looking radiant and completely unaware that her world was about to implode. Marcus stood at the altar, handsome in his tuxedo and playing his role perfectly. To any casual observer, this looked like a fairy tale wedding. Ryan was nowhere to be seen during the processional, but I spotted him lurking near a side exit, presumably waiting for his cue to whisk Dahlia away after the ceremony concluded. He had no idea that his escape route was about to become his public humiliation. The officiant began the ceremony with traditional words about love, commitment, and honesty. The irony was almost too much to bear. As he spoke about the sacred trust between partners, I watched my parents beaming proudly, completely oblivious that their carefully orchestrated deception was minutes away from complete exposure. When the officiant reached the section about objections, the chapel fell silent. This was the moment I had been waiting for. "I object," I said clearly, standing up with my folder in hand. Gasps echoed throughout the chapel. My mother immediately stood up, pointing at me dramatically. "She is mentally unstable. Someone call security. She is having an episode." "Actually, Mom, I am having a moment of perfect clarity. And I think everyone here deserves to know the truth about what they are witnessing today." I walked calmly toward the front of the chapel, addressing the crowd directly. "My name is Calera, and I am the sister who was deliberately excluded from this wedding because my family needed a scapegoat for their lies. What you are watching today is not a love story. It is an elaborate fraud designed to steal money from Marcus and destroy my reputation in the process." I began distributing copies of the evidence to people in the front rows, who immediately started passing them back through the crowd. The documents included screenshots of Dahlia and Ryan together, financial records showing misuse of Marcus's money, and email exchanges between my parents coordinating their deception. "Dahlia has been in a relationship with my ex-boyfriend Ryan for almost a year," I continued. "She broke up with Marcus 6 months ago but continued this charade because they could not afford to lose the wedding deposits. My parents have spent months telling everyone that I am mentally unstable to prevent me from exposing their lies." Dahlia finally found her voice, screaming from the back of the chapel, "She is lying. She is obsessed with Ryan and cannot accept that he chose me over her." "Really? Then explain this," I said, holding up my phone and playing the recording of Ryan's confession. His voice echoed clearly through the chapel's sound system as he admitted to the affair and described how my parents had orchestrated the entire situation. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs and angry whispers. Family members were examining the evidence and realizing the extent of the deception. Uncle Robert stood up, his face red with fury. "You told me Calera had threatened violence if this wedding proceeded. You made me believe she was dangerous." Aunt Patricia was crying openly. "You said she was stalking Ryan and needed professional help. We were all so worried about her." Marcus stepped forward, his voice steady despite the emotional devastation visible on his face. "I want everyone to know that Calera contacted me 10 days ago to tell me the truth. I have spent the last week discovering that my entire relationship was a lie. Dahlia has been using my money to fund dates with Ryan while convincing me that our problems were my fault." He pulled out his own phone and began reading from Dahlia's emails. Quote, "Marcus is so gullible. He actually thinks his inadequacies are the reason I do not want to be intimate anymore. Once we get through the ceremony and the vendors are paid, I can finally be free to be with Ryan publicly." The chapel was in complete chaos now. Dahlia was screaming denials while simultaneously looking around desperately for Ryan, who had apparently fled when he realized the plan was collapsing. My parents were trying to leave, but several family members were blocking their path, demanding explanations. Amanda stood up with her recording equipment, addressing the crowd professionally. "I am a journalist, and I have been documenting this situation for potential legal action. What you have witnessed today is systematic fraud, emotional abuse, and defamation. This family has spent months destroying an innocent person's reputation to cover their crimes." The officiant, clearly overwhelmed by the unprecedented situation, attempted to restore order. "I think it is safe to say that this ceremony cannot proceed under these circumstances. Perhaps everyone should take some time to process this information privately." But the crowd was not dispersing quietly. Years of suppressed family tensions were erupting as people realized how extensively they had been manipulated. Relatives were comparing notes about the lies they had been told, discovering that my parents had customized their deception for each audience. Cousin Maria stood up, tears streaming down her face. "I am so sorry, Calera. They convinced me you were having a breakdown, and I believed them instead of trusting my own relationship with you. They made me complicit in isolating you when you needed family support the most." As I looked around the chapel at the faces of people who finally understood the truth, I felt a deep sense of vindication mixed with profound sadness. This public explosion had been necessary to stop their ongoing damage, but it also meant the complete destruction of any possibility for family reconciliation. Dahlia made one final attempt to salvage the situation, screaming that everyone was being manipulated by my jealousy and mental illness. But her credibility was destroyed, and her words only reinforced how thoroughly she had been exposed. The wedding that was supposed to celebrate love and commitment had become a public trial where justice was finally served. The chapel cleared slowly as family members processed the magnitude of what they had witnessed. Small groups clustered in the parking lot, examining evidence and sharing their own pieces of the deception puzzle. The fairy tale wedding had transformed into a crime scene investigation with dozens of witnesses comparing notes. Dahlia disappeared immediately after her final outburst, presumably to find Ryan and attempt damage control. But her escape was temporary. Amanda had already contacted local authorities about the financial fraud, and there would be legal consequences regardless of where she tried to hide. Marcus stood at the altar for several minutes after everyone left, still wearing his tuxedo and staring at the decorations that had been purchased with his stolen money. When I approached him, he looked up with a mixture of relief and devastation. "Thank you," he said quietly. "If you had not stopped this, I would have been legally and financially responsible for everything. They would have destroyed my life completely." The financial implications were staggering as we began calculating the scope of their theft. Dahlia had charged over $12,000 in wedding expenses to accounts Marcus was responsible for, but the money had actually funded her secret relationship with Ryan. Romantic weekend getaways, expensive dinners, and even jewelry that she claimed was for the wedding had all been purchased for her affair. More disturbing was discovering the timeline of their emotional manipulation. Marcus found evidence that Dahlia had been deliberately provoking fights and undermining his self-confidence for months, following a playbook that seemed designed to make him question his own reality. She had convinced him that his natural reactions to her changed behavior were signs of his own inadequacy. "She made me feel like I was losing my mind," he admitted. "Every time I noticed something was wrong, she would turn it around and make it about my jealousy or insecurity. I started seeing a therapist because I thought I was becoming paranoid and controlling." The psychological abuse had been systematic and sophisticated. Dahlia had isolated Marcus from his friends by claiming they were bad influences on their relationship. She had discouraged him from pursuing career opportunities that would have given him more independence. She had even convinced him that his family disliked her and was trying to sabotage their happiness. Meanwhile, my parents were facing their own reckoning in the parking lot. Extended family members who had discovered the truth were demanding explanations and apologies. Uncle Robert was particularly furious because he had contributed money to what he thought was Dahlia's legitimate wedding. "You stole from me," he shouted at my father. "You took my money under false pretenses and used it to fund your daughter's affair. That is theft, and I want my money back immediately." Aunt Patricia was devastated by her role in spreading lies about my mental health. She had repeated my mother's stories to other family members, inadvertently participating in the defamation campaign. The guilt was overwhelming as she realized how many people she had turned against me based on fabricated evidence. "I called your workplace," she confessed to me through tears. "Your mother said you were having a breakdown and might do something dangerous. I was so worried that I contacted your former supervisor to make sure someone was checking on you. I am so ashamed that I believed her lies." The professional damage was extensive. My former colleagues had been told I was unstable and potentially dangerous. Several potential clients had been warned away from working with me. My reputation in the local business community had been systematically destroyed based on completely fabricated concerns about my mental health. But the most devastating revelation came from my grandmother, who was 92 years old and rarely spoke at family gatherings. She approached me with tears in her eyes and grabbed my hands. "They told me you had been diagnosed with a serious mental illness and that seeing me would be too stressful for your condition," she whispered. "I have not seen you in 8 months because I thought I was protecting your health. I have been so worried and heartbroken." Learning that my parents had used my grandmother's love for me as a weapon in their manipulation campaign was the final straw. They had not just attacked my reputation, they had stolen precious time with a beloved family member who might not have much time left. As the afternoon progressed, the true scope of their deception became clear. They had told different lies to different people, carefully crafting each story to maximize damage while minimizing the chance of exposure. Relatives compared notes and discovered that the timeline of my supposed breakdown kept shifting depending on what they needed to explain. My mother had told some people I was in therapy for anger management. Others heard that I was being treated for depression and suicidal ideation. Still others were informed that I had been diagnosed with a personality disorder that made me prone to violent outbursts. None of these stories were consistent with each other, but each had been designed to justify excluding me from family events and discrediting anything I might say. The wedding vendors began arriving to set up for the reception, unaware that the ceremony had ended in scandal. When they learned what had happened, several expressed relief that they had insisted on partial payment up front. The florist revealed that Dahlia had been pressuring her to extend credit terms, claiming that family money would cover everything after the wedding. She kept saying her wealthy relatives would take care of all outstanding balances once the ceremony was complete, the florist explained. Now I understand why she was so insistent that payment could wait until after today. The vendors had been set up as unknowing participants in the fraud. After the fake ceremony, Dahlia and Ryan would have disappeared, leaving Marcus legally responsible for thousands of dollars in unpaid bills for a wedding that was never legitimate. Amanda spent the afternoon interviewing family members and documenting the extent of the deception for her article. What had started as a personal favor to help her brother had evolved into a major story about systematic family fraud and psychological abuse. This is not just a family drama, she explained to relatives who were still trying to process what they had witnessed. This is a criminal enterprise that destroyed multiple lives through calculated deception. The financial theft alone constitutes felony fraud in this state. As evening approached, the full consequences of their actions were becoming clear. Legal action was inevitable. Financial restitution would be required. Professional relationships had been damaged. Family bonds had been permanently severed. But most importantly, the truth was finally exposed, and the people who had been victims of their manipulation could begin healing and rebuilding their lives based on reality instead of lies. The fairy tale wedding had become a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked manipulation and the power of truth to eventually triumph over even the most elaborate deceptions. 6 months after the wedding that never was, my life had transformed completely. The legal proceedings moved swiftly once Amanda's investigation provided a comprehensive framework for prosecutors. Dahlia and Ryan were charged with fraud, my parents faced defamation lawsuits, and Marcus successfully recovered most of his stolen money through civil court. The financial restitution was satisfying, but the personal vindication meant even more. Every family member who had been told lies about my mental health received copies of the court documents proving the systematic nature of the deception. My reputation was not just restored, it was enhanced by the courage I had shown in exposing the truth. Professional opportunities that had disappeared during the months of defamation began returning. Former clients who had been warned away from working with me reached out to apologize and offer new projects. My consulting business expanded as word spread about my integrity and determination in the face of adversity. Marcus and I developed an unexpected friendship forged through shared trauma and mutual respect. He started therapy to process the psychological abuse he had endured, and I continued my own counseling to work through the family betrayal. We often compared notes about healing from systematic manipulation and rebuilding trust in our own judgment. The hardest part, Marcus explained during one of our coffee meetings, is learning to trust my own perceptions again. They made me doubt everything I was feeling and seeing. Recovery means remembering that my instincts were right all along. His words resonated deeply because I had experienced the same gaslighting. My family had convinced me that my reactions to their treatment were evidence of my instability, when in reality, my responses had been completely appropriate to the abuse I was experiencing. The extended family dynamics shifted dramatically as people processed their unwitting participation in the deception. Uncle Robert became one of my strongest advocates, using his influence to ensure that other family members understood the true scope of what had happened. Aunt Patricia channeled her guilt into fierce protection of my reputation, immediately shutting down any remaining whispers or speculation. My grandmother's reaction was the most heartwarming transformation. Once she understood how she had been manipulated, she insisted on spending time with me every week. We developed a tradition of Sunday dinners where she shared family history and I helped her with technology. The stolen months could not be recovered, but our relationship became stronger than ever. "Your parents forgot something important," she told me one evening over homemade soup. "Family is not just about blood. It is about love, honesty, and choosing to support each other. You have more real family in this room right now than they will ever have." The criminal trial provided closure but also revealed additional layers of their manipulation that had not been uncovered initially. During testimony, it emerged that my parents had been planning to use the wedding fraud as a way to access Marcus's family money for their own financial difficulties. They had been struggling with debt and saw Dahlia's marriage as a potential solution to their problems. Ryan's testimony was particularly pathetic as he tried to minimize his role in the conspiracy. He claimed to be a victim of manipulation himself, suggesting that my parents had pressured him into the relationship with promises of financial support and family acceptance. But recorded conversations and email evidence clearly showed his active participation in deceiving both Marcus and me. Dahlia never showed genuine remorse, even during sentencing. She continued to maintain that her actions were justified because she deserved to be happy and that Ryan was a better match for her than Marcus had been. Her complete lack of empathy or accountability reinforced how right I had been to expose the truth publicly. The legal consequences were significant but fair. Dahlia and Ryan received probation and community service, along with requirements to pay full restitution and attend counseling. My parents faced civil penalties for defamation and were required to send written apologies to every person they had lied to about my mental health. More importantly, restraining orders prevented any of them from contacting me or spreading further false information about my life. The legal protection gave me peace of mind and space to rebuild without fear of continued harassment or manipulation. Professional therapy helped me understand that their behavior represented a pattern of narcissistic abuse that had probably been present throughout my childhood but had escalated when I became an adult capable of questioning their control. The wedding fraud was not an isolated incident but the culmination of years of manipulation and boundary violations. Healthy families do not orchestrate elaborate deceptions to control their members' lives, my therapist explained. Your reaction to their treatment was not evidence of instability, it was evidence of psychological health. You recognized abuse and refused to accept it. This perspective shift was transformative. Instead of seeing myself as the family problem that needed to be managed, I began understanding myself as the person who had been brave enough to challenge a toxic system. My supposed dramatic personality was actually a healthy refusal to accept gaslighting and manipulation. The chosen family I built in the aftermath became more supportive and genuine than my biological family had ever been. Marcus remained a close friend who understood the unique trauma of systematic deception. Amanda became an advocate and ally who helped me navigate media attention when her article about the case was published nationally. Extended family members who had been deceived along with me formed a support network that celebrated honesty and authenticity. We created new traditions based on transparency and mutual respect, rather than the manipulation and control that had characterized previous family gatherings. Even unexpected friendships developed with some of the wedding vendors who had been victimized by the fraud. The photographer who had been pressured to hide the groom's identity in photos became a colleague who referred clients to my consulting business. The florist who had been manipulated into extending credit became a friend who understood the importance of standing up to financial abuse. 18 months later, I was invited to speak at a conference about psychological abuse and recovery. Standing at the podium, looking out at an audience of survivors and advocates, I reflected on how much had changed since that devastating text message about the drama-free wedding. The truth had not just set me free. It had revealed the strength and integrity I possessed but had been taught to doubt. The family that had tried to destroy my reputation had inadvertently proven my resilience and character. Their elaborate deception had backfired completely, exposing them while vindicating me. The wedding that was supposed to celebrate fake love and hidden agendas had instead become the catalyst for authentic relationships based on honesty and mutual respect. Justice had not just been served. It had created space for genuine healing and growth. Looking back now, I can honestly say that receiving that cruel text message was one of the best things that ever happened to me. It forced me to confront a toxic situation I might have tolerated indefinitely, and it led to the discovery of my own strength and the building of a chosen family that truly supports and values me. Sometimes the most devastating betrayals become the foundation for the most authentic transformations. Have you ever experienced a moment when someone's cruelty actually ended up being a gift that showed you who they really were? I would love to hear your stories about family karma and finding justice in the comments below. Please hit that like button if this story resonated with you, and do not forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about standing up to manipulation and finding your strength. Share this video if you know someone who needs to hear that they are not crazy for questioning toxic family dynamics. Thank you so much for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the family that tries to break you ends up proving just how unbreakable you really are. Wishing you all the courage to choose authenticity over convenience and truth over temporary peace.